the spring of 1968, a Soviet submarine carrying nuclear missiles and 98 men sailed into the Pacific and simply stopped existing. Moscow sent a fleet to find it. They searched for weeks, across thousands of square miles of empty ocean. They found nothing, and eventually they gave up. What they never knew was that on the other side of the world, a small group of Americans already knew exactly where their submarine was lying, 3 miles down, in total darkness, on the floor of the sea. And those Americans were about to attempt something that had never been done, and has arguably never been done since. To reach 3 miles into the abyss, take hold of a 1,600-ton submarine and lift it whole back into the light. To do it, they would build a machine the size of a city block. They would spend the equivalent of nearly $2 billion, and they would hide every piece of it behind a lie so bold that, when most people first hear this story, they've already been told the cover version, the same one sold to the world in 1974, that it was a mining ship, that it belonged to a reclusive billionaire, that it was hunting for rocks on the ocean floor. None of that was true. Her name was K-129, a diesel-electric submarine of the Soviet Pacific Fleet, and she was not empty. She carried 3 ballistic missiles tipped with nuclear warheads and torpedoes to match, a small, floating apocalypse on patrol. In February of 1968, she left her base on the Kamchatka Peninsula and headed out under the Pacific on a routine deterrence patrol. She was supposed to check in on a schedule. She missed it. Then she missed the next one. When a nuclear submarine goes silent, a navy does not sleep. The Soviets launched one of the largest search efforts in their history, sweeping the ocean north of Hawaii. Ships, aircraft, weeks of effort, and the sea gave them nothing back. No wreckage, no oil slick, no answer. Eventually, Moscow did the only thing left to do. They quietly declared the boat lost with all hands and closed the file. As far as the Soviet Union was concerned, K-129 and her 98 men were simply gone, somewhere in a stretch of ocean too vast and too deep to ever search properly. They were wrong about one thing: the ocean is not as empty as it looks. Something had been listening the whole time, and it had heard exactly where their submarine died. Stretched across the floor of the Pacific, the United States had built a secret, a vast network of underwater microphones, wired to listen for the sound of Soviet submarines. It was called SOSUS, and on the day K-129 sank, it had been listening. American analysts pulled the recordings and traced a single sharp event back to a point on the map, a point the Soviet search had never gone near. They knew where the submarine was to within a few miles. The people who owned it did not. So the Navy sent a special submarine of its own, the USS Halibut, rigged with cameras and towed sleds, down into the black. And over weeks, in water so deep the pressure would crush a lesser hull, Halibut took tens of thousands of photographs. The pictures came back, and men in a windowless room understood what they were looking at. A Soviet ballistic missile submarine, broken but substantially there, resting on the seabed, with her nuclear missiles, her torpedoes, and her code machines still inside. To the men in that room, this was the single greatest intelligence prize of the Cold War, sitting untouched on the ocean floor. Everything they wanted to know about how the Soviets aimed their nuclear weapons was down there. There was only one problem. It was sitting under 16,000 feet of water, and no one on Earth had ever lifted anything from that deep. So how exactly do you steal a submarine off the bottom of the sea? Start with the numbers, because the numbers are insane. The target weighs more than 1,000 cars. It's lying 3 miles down, in near-freezing dark, under pressure that would flatten a tank. And you have to bring it up in one piece without the water, or the enemy, tearing it apart. The plan the CIA settled on sounds like something a child would draw. A ship on the surface, a giant mechanical claw, and 3 miles of steel pipe screwed together section by section, lowering that claw straight down into the abyss to grab the submarine and haul it home. It was, on paper, impossible. And the engineering was somehow the easy part. Because here's the thing about doing something like this in the open ocean: you cannot hide it. To lift that submarine, a strange, enormous ship would have to sit parked over one specific spot in the middle of the Pacific for weeks, while Soviet trawlers, which shadowed American ships constantly, sat and watched the whole time. You could build the most incredible machine in history. It would mean nothing if the first Russian captain who sailed past asked the obvious question, "What is that thing, and what is it doing out here?" So, before they built anything, the CIA needed something else. They needed a lie. A cover story big enough to hide the most expensive covert operation ever attempted in plain sight on the open sea. And they found the one man on Earth whose name could sell it. His name was Howard Hughes, aviator, film producer, one of the richest men alive, and by the 1970s, the most famous recluse in the world. He had vanished from public life into hotel rooms, seen by almost no one, the subject of endless rumor. Nobody knew what Howard Hughes was really doing with his money, which is precisely what made him perfect. The CIA built its cover around him. The story went like this. Hughes, ever the eccentric visionary, was funding a bold new industry, mining the deep ocean floor for manganese nodules, strange metal-rich lumps scattered across the abyss. To do it, his people were building a one-of-a-kind ship, the Hughes Glomar Explorer. It was genius. The idea was just plausible enough that other companies actually started their own deep-sea mining projects to compete. And because it was a Hughes project, secretive, expensive, and strange, no one blinked at the parts that made no sense. Of course it was weird. It was Howard Hughes. So the ship was built out in the open, launched to headlines, and photographed by the press as a marvel of private industry. The world watched it and saw exactly what it was told to see. In the summer of 1974, the Glomar Explorer sailed out into the Pacific, stopped over a point in the empty blue, and held its position. 3 miles beneath it, in the dark, 98 dead men and every secret they were carrying waited on the seabed. And the machine began to descend. They called the capture vehicle Clementine, a name almost gentle for what was, essentially, a set of enormous steel claws the size of a house hanging on the end of that 3-mile string of pipe. For days, the crew lowered it, adding pipe section by section, the whole ship functioning as a single impossible crane. And the entire time, they were not alone. Soviet vessels drifted nearby, curious about the strange American ship sitting motionless in the middle of nowhere. At one point, a Soviet ship circled so close the crew had to hide the equipment and hold their nerve, praying the cover story would hold for a few more days. Down in the black, Clementine reached the seabed and closed its arms around the broken submarine. Then the hardest part began, the lift. 1,600 tons of Soviet steel rising slowly through 3 miles of ocean, hour after hour, day after day. And then, partway up, it failed. Several of the great steel arms broke, and the submarine they had crossed an ocean and spent a fortune to steal simply tore apart in the water. A huge portion of it, by most accounts around 2/3, ripped free and fell, tumbling back down into the dark, gone for good. Gone with it, almost certainly, were the very things they had wanted most, the nuclear missiles and the room full of codes. What reached the surface was a fraction, a broken piece of the front of a submarine. The CIA has never fully said what was inside that piece, but we do know one thing they found, because of what they did next. Inside the recovered section were the bodies of Soviet sailors, some of the 98 men who had gone down with the boat 6 years before. Think about the position those Americans were in. They were, at that exact moment, in the middle of the most audacious theft in the history of espionage, stealing a nuclear submarine out from under their enemy. And they stopped, and they did something almost no one would have expected. They gave those men a funeral, a formal burial at sea, conducted with full honors, the enemy's dead, treated with the dignity of their own. And they filmed the entire thing. For nearly 20 years, that film sat locked away with everything else. Then, in 1992, with the Cold War finally over, the director of the CIA quietly handed a copy of it to the president of Russia, so that, at last, the families might know how their fathers and sons had been laid to rest. That is the part of this story almost no one knows: the theft and the strange grace hidden inside it. But in 1974, none of it was supposed to exist at all. The ship, the lie, the claw, the men, all of it was meant to stay buried on the ocean floor and in a sealed vault forever. It didn't. And the thing that undid the greatest secret operation of the Cold War wasn't a spy or a defector or the Soviets. It was a burglar. In the summer of 1974, even as the Glomar Explorer was out at sea, thieves broke into the headquarters of Howard Hughes's business empire and stole a pile of documents. Some of those papers hinted at a strange arrangement between Hughes and the United States government. Reporters started pulling the thread. Within months, investigative journalists had pieced together the impossible: that the mining ship was a fake, that the whole thing was a CIA operation to raise a Soviet submarine. In early 1975, the story broke. And when a journalist filed a formal request demanding the CIA confirm the project even existed, the agency gave an answer it had never given before. It would neither confirm nor deny the existence of any such records. That single phrase became a permanent tool of the American government, used to this day all over the world to say nothing at all without lying. It has a name now. They call it the Glomar response. And it was born from this ship and this lie. For 35 more years, the official position was that phrase: nothing. Then, in February of 2010, the CIA finally released a heavily censored internal history and admitted the essentials. Yes, there was a ship. Yes, there was a claw. Yes, they had tried to raise K-129 from the bottom of the Pacific. They admitted almost all of it. But to this day, they have never told anyone exactly what they pulled up from the bottom of the sea. Nothing about this was supposed to be knowable. A submarine that vanished. A machine that shouldn't exist. A billionaire's name on a lie the size of an ocean. And a phrase, invented to protect it, that outlived the entire Cold War. Most of that Soviet submarine is still down there, scattered across the seabed 3 miles below the waves, exactly where the claw dropped it. The men who were never recovered are down there too. And the truth about what came up, the whole truth, is still sitting in a vault somewhere, behind 5 words. Look it up tonight and you'll find the ship, you'll find the lie, you'll find the claw. What you will not find, half a century later, is the answer. This is Buried Records, where the things the world tried to forget get dug back up. If this one stayed with you, subscribe and we'll keep digging.